Well, hello and welcome to our Hump Day. I'm so glad that you joined in with us. This is the beginning of our Black History series, our Black History month that is allotted to us, the shortest month of the year. And they say, well, we do Black History. Well, Black History is all 12 months. But anyway, our lesson for the month of February will be lift every voice and sing the biblical significance of the verses of James Weldon Johnson's Black National Anthem. And just let me say, my sisters and brothers, the other day when I was watching, I don't know what football game it was, but it was a football game, and they had someone sing the national anthem. Then they had someone to sing, I guess, the Hispanic national anthem. And then they said I can't remember who they called on that would sing the Negro national anthem. I was so pleased. I really was, because I said, well, I guess they recognize that we have a national anthem, even if many of us fail to recognize it. But I want you to know that this month we will give the biblical significance of the verses of James Weldon Johnson's Black History Anthem. All right? So, our first lesson today is the journey between pronouns. The journey between pronouns. And I want to say this. I'm trying to get my timer here, you all. Now, here we go. Our lesson will come from Exodus chapter 1, verse 6 through 14, and then 22. Then we're going to go to Exodus 2, and then I'm not going to do all this reading, but I'm telling you so that you can go back and read. Now, the first thing that I want us to realize this. I'm going to say it at the beginning, and if I say it every week, perhaps that you will hear me. Jesus was not blonde hair and blue eyes. If he was blonde hair and blue eyes, how in the world could they have gone to Egypt to hide out when Herod and Pilate and everybody was looking for him? He was not. Remember where they said to go? They were told to go to Egypt. Egypt is in Africa. Now, you know, Jesus would have stood out like a sore thumb. Blonde hair and blue eye, and he was in Africa? No. He had to look like them to be able to hide out there. All right? So we need to remember when we talk about Moses and Joseph and all of this today, then these people are people of color. Make me say it no more. People of color. So now, let us go. In time, Joseph and all of his brothers died, ending that entire generation. But their descendants, the Israelites, had many children and grandchildren. In fact, they multiplied so greatly that they became extremely powerful and filled the land. Eventually, a new king came to power in Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph or what he had done. He said to his people, "Look, the people of Israel now outnumber us and are stronger than we are." Well, you know why? Because they working. You sitting. We must make a plan to keep them from growing even more. If we don't, and if war breaks out, they will join our enemies and fight against us. Then they will escape from the country. So the Egyptians made the Israelites their slave. Now, let me stop right there. So the Egyptians made the Israelites their slave. Let's stop right there and let me ask this question. How could the Egyptians make the Israelites their slaves when we just said the people of Israel now outnumber us? If they outnumber us, and they said, look here, and stronger than we are, so we must make a plan to keep them from growing even more. If we don't, and if war break out, they will join our enemies and fight against us. Then they will escape from the country. So the Egyptians made the Israelites their slave. Plain and simple. Just like we need to go back, we know how we got here to become slaves because they took us from Africa and brought us over on ships. But we need to look behind the scenes to see what and how and what caused that to happen. Now, when we look at this and say the Egyptians made the Israelites their slaves, and I ask the question, how did that happen? Stop and think. Policies. They were in the power. They were in the seats. They had all the power. And to make sure that they keep the power, what did they do? They made laws and they made the Israelites their slaves. Now, they appointed brutal slave drivers over them, hoping to wear them down with crushing labor. They forced them to build cities. Now, my sisters and brothers, I said we weren't going to read all that. And we're not. But I want you to jump down to verse 13. So the Egyptians worked the people of Israel without mercy. That's the same thing that happened to us as a people. We were worked without mercy. They made their lives bitter, forcing them to mix mortar and make bricks and do all the work in the fields. They were ruthless in all their demands. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people. Listen to me now. This is important. Throw every newborn Hebrew boy into the Nile River, but you may let the girls live. Whenever that you want to hamper or get rid of a people or do great harm to a people, the first thing that they would do would be come after the men, the boys. And that is happening, my sisters and brothers, today. Oh, if we would just open our eyes and see the highest number of kids who are put out of class are black boys. The highest number of children that don't graduate are black boys. Then they use the population of the black male in early elementary schools to decide how many prisons they are going to need. But they try to kill the boys. But look what Exodus 2 tells us that God will do. About this time, about the same time, Pharaoh said, kill the boys, throw them into the Nile. Let the women live, let the girls live. About this time, a man and a woman from the tribe of Levi got married. The woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son. Well, she's supposed to take him and throw him into the river. She saw that he was a special baby and kept him hidden for 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, then she said, okay, I got to do something. She got a basket made of potpourri reeds and waterproofed it with tar and pitch. She put the baby in the basket and laid it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile River. The baby's sister then stood at a distance watching to see what would happen to him. Now, so soon Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe in the river, and her attendants walked along the river bank. When the princess saw the basket among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it for her. When the princess opened it, she saw the baby. The little boy was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This must be one of the Hebrew children, she said. Then the baby's sister, woo, I tell you, God is smooth, approached the princess. Should I go and find one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you, she asked. Yes, do, the princess replied. So the girl went and called the baby's mother. Take this baby and nurse him for me. See, that's the one thing that also happened in slavery. Take this baby and nurse him for me, the princess told the baby's mother. The only thing is, we didn't hear the I will pay you for your help. So the woman took her baby home, and nursed him. Got paid for nursing her own child. Later, when the boy was older, his mother brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her own son. The princess named him Moses, for she explained, I lifted him out of the water. Now, let me say, see, the princess gave the baby to the mother and said, nurse him. And that's the same thing during slavery that the women had to do. Before they fed their own children, they had to nurse the white mother's baby. Woo-wee. This is not going to be an easy month, but it's time for us to look at what is the truth. They would have to nurse the white baby before they even nurse their own baby. Now, if I worked out in the fields all day and I'll get all that much to eat, I may not have had enough milk to feed both babies. But you do the white baby first and yours later. But that's what it was. So let's look at verse 11. Many years later, when Moses had grown up, he went out to visit his own people, the Hebrews, and he saw how hard they were forced to work. During his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. After looking in all directions to make sure no one was watching, Moses killed the Egyptian, killed that dude, and hid the body in the sand. The next day, when Moses went out to visit his people again, he saw two Hebrew men fighting. "Why are you beating up your friend?" Moses said to the one who had started the fight. And the man replied, so much like us, "Hey, who appointed you to be our prince and judge? So what you gonna do? You gonna kill me like you killed that Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid, thinking, everyone knows what I did. So Moses fled. And sure enough, Pharaoh heard what had happened and he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in the land of Midian. Now let's stop right there. Midian, the Midianites were black people. The Midianites were black people. Now, let me tell you, the other week when Pastor Cosby preached, he talked about when God wanted something done, when he got ready to move to do something, a baby boy was always born. We saw that God, when he wanted to deliver them, Moses was born. He said when God wanted to tear down the walls of Jericho, Joshua was born. When God wanted to have a prophet to prophesy about his coming son, Isaiah was born. And when God wanted to redeem mankind, Jesus was born. And I have to say this, when God was ready to help black people, Martin Luther King was born. Because God says, this is the word of the Lord unto Zerubbabel, saying, not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. Then let's look at Acts 7:21-23. When they had to abandon him, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and raised him as her own son. Moses was taught all the wisdom of the Egyptians and he was powerful in both speech and action. He was both powerful in speech and action. But yet when God said, Moses, I want you to go back to Egypt, Moses said, I can't talk. But here we see he was powerful in both speech and action. Then Hebrews 11:24 tells us, by faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Now, our lesson aim, reason why we studying this lesson, is to examine parallels between the Hebrews' experience and the African American experience. Is to encourage Christians to know that God is, now listen, to encourage Christians to know that God is on the side of the oppressed, and to help Christians recognize their responsibility to lift others as they have been uplifted. Now, James Weldon Johnson and his brother John Johnson wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing in 1900. Now look, the song was created to be sung by 500 school children in Jacksonville, Florida on Abraham Lincoln's birthday. But this song would later become known as the Negro National Anthem. Is a song about the work Christians should start when they begin reading the Bible. Verse 1 focuses on the present, where we are now. Verse 2 is about the past, where we've come from. And verse 3 is about the future, where we are going. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Now let's jump on down to point 1, lift. The most important word in the Negro National Anthem is also found in verse 10 of the lesson. Lift. The Johnson boys chose as the first word of their anthem, lift. And in Exodus we read that Moses was lifted from the water. And we learn in this verse that Moses' name means I live. And after he was lifted from the water, he turned back Oh, you got to catch this. He turned back to lift his brothers and sisters out of slavery. And the whole point of lift every voice and sing is that people who have been lifted then must turn around and lift somebody else. Now, I'm not talking about, see, the problem with us, when we think that we got a little something, we move. We go chasing the white man out to the East End. Oh, I don't want to. Many of us are scared of the West End. We ain't living in the West End. And now we too afraid to come down to the West End. And I will publicly say here and now, I am so thankful that this church, St. Stephen, her pastor, Kevin Cosby, that we stayed in the poorest neighborhood. Why am I happy? Because the poor people need to have hope. Hope. But now, just as soon as we get 2 nickels to rub together, we go flying out someplace else. The first chapter in the book of Exodus gives us the background story. When Joseph and all his brothers died, it ended that entire generation, but their descendants, the Israelites, had many children and grandchildren. Well, it's just like us. We had so many children and grandchildren. They multiplied so greatly that they became extremely powerful. The Egyptians feared they would overtake them. Therefore, they had to take measures to control this growing population. And much of the rise of white Christian nationalism in America and the push for border walls, and that's what we've seen, is rooted in a similar fear. And it's correct fear that a minority population may soon take over. So, the Pharaoh who came to power in Exodus said, I have to build a wall. And now we see the browning of America. And the browning of America is the reason why there's an attack against critical race theory. There's opposition against teaching black history in schools and diversity, equality, and inclusion programs. That's why we see all this issue. You can't teach black history. They don't want, well, guess what? Because you don't want it taught doesn't mean that we don't have a history. I learned black history because I came up in segregated schools and we taught it in black schools. And I was amazed the first time that I heard. I was sitting over in Phyllis Wheatley Elementary School when I found out how Phyllis Wheatley became a slave. I was mortified that this young girl sitting over there in Africa and gets snatched up, put on the ship and sent over here to America. I thought, and never see her mama again? I was mortified, traumatized. I thought, how cruel can you get? That's how cruel slavery is. And Pharaoh, he created policies that would keep the Egyptians down. The white man has created and is continuing to create policies to keep America, could keep the minorities down, because he fears that someday the minorities will become a majority. And by 2050, the United States will be a majority nation. See, it's all about power, my sisters and brothers. Who's in control? And this is not new. Pharaoh said to his people, he said, look, the people of Israel now outnumber us and stronger than we are. Hey, we got to get a plan for this. And they created public policies to keep them from growing, or to stop them from growing even more. And that's what is called power. Power is the ability to cause something to happen. Power is also the ability to prevent something from happening. And so Pharaoh's plan was to keep the Egyptians from growing even more so if war would break out. Because they feared they would not align themselves with Egypt's enemies. Or they thought that they would align themselves with Egypt's enemy and fight against them. So guess what? They made the Israelites their slaves for 400 years. But despite being enslaved, the Israelite population continued to grow. Despite being enslaved, the black population continued to grow. They didn't want to feed us. They give us a little bit of anything. And guess what? Our mamas, our grandmamas, our great-grandmamas, the women took the little weeds and they would doctor it up. They gave us the neck bones of the chicken. Well, guess what? We ate the neck bones. We ate the greens. We ate the pig's foot. We even ate the pig's guts. And we survived. Point 2. Was to kill the boys. Kill off the boys. And that's what they did. They threw every newborn Hebrew boy in the Nile River. They let the girls live. Well, we saw that again with Emmett Till. After they tortured him, after they lynched him, beat him, they threw him in the river. They threw him in the river. And Hebrews threw their babies into the river, and it was Negroes who took the 2 white men to the house where Emmett Till was staying. And let me say this. There is a consistent and deliberate effort to destroy young black men. They are killed physically, but they are killed through lack of opportunity, through mass incarceration, through isolation in poverty. Who is filling the detention halls in our schools? Who is filling the prisons? It's our black boys. See, and this happened through mass incarceration that was inaugurated by the Democrats in the New Jack era. You know New Jack, and you know you watched that movie. The crack cocaine era of the 1990s. And Tyree Nichols was beaten down by society long before the Memphis police officer who looked like him had beaten him to death. I tell you, my sisters and brothers, in communities where there is little access to opportunities, when there is no opportunity, young black people get beat down. Now, Jehoshaphat and Miriam practiced civil disobedience to keep Moses alive. Well, guess what? We need to stop and consider in what ways have black women often initiated efforts to help save black males. Then I said, hey, consider the story of the late Maya Angelou, telling the story of her grandmother hiding her Uncle Willie in a bin so he would not get harmed in a planned Ku Klux Klan raid. Mothers today have to train their young boys at an early age. If the police stop you, keep your hands in sight. If you're driving, stick your hands out the window. When my great nephew told me, he said, I know what to do when the police come up. What? He said, I know to put my hands out the window to show them I got nothing. It's prayer. It's praying time. His mother and his grandmother say, shh. I pray for him all the time because he's big, he's strong. They loved him when he was out on the football field, but they are scared of him when he's not on the field, just walking down the street, because he's big. But then we have got to learn to lift up, to lift others out. Lifted up. You have been lifted. You need to learn how to lift others out. Pharaoh's daughter took Moses in as her own son, and she named him I Lift. I lift. Without knowing it, the Egyptian princes sealed Moses' destiny. You see, God prepares a table and he'll make our enemies pay for it. David said, he prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemy. But what I'm saying to you now is he'll make your enemies even pay for it. Because Moses was lifted from the water and went to live in Pharaoh's house for 40 years. He received the best clothing. He received a good education. He received everything. Then, verse 11 tells us that 40 years later, when Moses was grown up, he went out to visit his own people. You know what it went. Then when he knew he needed to lift his people from slavery, and that's what Lift Every Voice and Sing is about. God protects Moses in the Nile, and God has protected you and has protected me. And we have a responsibility to go back and help lift somebody else. You remember last year we did a series on Jesus and the disinherited, and how we will walk past people, don't want to make eye contact lest they come and ask us for something. But how many times have you had to ask the Lord to lift you? And he had to lean way down and lift you up. And we tell him, I need you to reach down and lift me, because I can't lift myself. So, yeah, life applications. You need to name someone who helped to lift you to a higher place, either educationally, spiritually, professionally, or socially. Think back over your life. Who helped you? Now, how have you expressed gratitude for having been lifted to a higher place? Now, one thing that I said, I don't mind saying it. My mother cleaned white people's houses, so it was honest work. And she went out, caught a bus every day to go and clean a white person's house. I said to myself, my sister said to herself, because she made this sacrifice, I am not going to clean a white person's house. What? How would it look? My mother made that sacrifice and I don't do any better? So I went to school, stayed in school, did my homework. And so how have you expressed gratitude? By being higher, doing more. Now, what are the risks involved in helping to lift someone else? What are the rewards? Think about it. How is the decision to lift up another person both a commitment and an investment? Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven rings. Ring with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening sky. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Now, let us march on, till victory is won. That is our lesson for today. Lift Every Voice and Sing is our series, the biblical significance of the verses of James Weldon Johnson's Black National Anthem. Our lesson next week is, what does victory look like? What does victory look like? Well, for those of you who might want to be lifted, or need to be lifted, I was lifted. I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despairing cry, and from the waters he lifted me. He lifted me. Now safe am I. I have been lifted. Love lifted me. Love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me. And if you want to be lifted out of the ways of despair, disappointment, darkness, and you feel you're going nowhere, go with us. We on our way. We will do you good. So you email us at newstart@ssclive.org or call us at 502-583-6798 and say, I want to go on this journey with you. And we'll be more than happy to take you in. Today's lesson, I'm not sure that I even said what the name of it was. The journey between two pronouns. Lift every voice and sing. The biblical significance of the verses of James Weldon Johnson's Black National Anthem. I'll see you next week. Be blessed.